Hi everyone, welcome back to Lifting the Lamp. Today I'm going to be challenging one of the great sacred cows of modern society and one of the key assumptions underpinning our entire economic system, which is that greed is in some way good. I'm going to be arguing why greed is not good, and in fact, you can benefit your life greatly by working on greed and freeing yourself of greed and the hold that it has on you. So those are some of the things I'm going to talk about. Hopefully you'll find this video useful and informative. Now, the expression greed is good is something that has been floating around in the culture for a few decades now. It comes from the movie Wall Street and is attributed to the fictional character Gordon Gekko, one of these Wall Street investment banker types. It's meant to be a satirization of the logic of neoliberal capitalism, but the irony seems to be missed on a lot of the corporations and the forces that are running our economy and running our society, and they seem to be taking this motto very, very literally. And what was meant as a satire has in fact become a critique of what the system is actually like. Because we have an economy which is a certain type of economy. There's different economic models, and we have an economic model which is capitalist, but it's not just any form of capitalism. It's a particularly rapacious and sociopathic form of capitalism, and a very excessive form known as neoliberal capitalism, which we've had since about the 1970s. This economic system which underpins the way that everything else in society works and dictates how everything in society will be determined. It's based around this obsession with constant growth, this obsession with always raising the profit margin, always accumulating more and more money just for its own sake, and doing whatever it takes to amass as much resources as possible, not for the benefit of the majority of the population, but for the benefit of a corporation, for the benefit of the boardroom, the shareholders, and the people that are at the very top of the pyramid. It's all about enriching the people that sit at the top of the economic hierarchy at the expense of everybody else. And that can come in the form of cutting wages or keeping wages stagnant so that they don't keep up with inflation, of artificially inflating the price of things so that people have to pay more and part with more of their money, and that money goes to the people that run the corporations. Or it can come in the form of a culture that promotes consumerism and encourages people to spend money on things that they don't need and part with their money that way. And then ultimately that goes into the pockets of the very wealthy who run these corporations. And so it's all about greed. And even the stuff that's reinvested back into a company, ultimately the end is to prop up this group of people who own and control all of the assets. So it's all based on greed. Our entire economic system is driven by greed, one of the cardinal sins. It really makes you realize that many of the dominant institutions in our society are completely under the control of the kingdom of darkness. And we're told that greed is good because it encourages people to grow a business, it encourages people to want more, to create more, to build more, ignoring the fact that you can do all of those things without greed, and you can have a noble kind of motivation for doing those things, which are much less likely to turn into something that is excessive and sinful. And really, when we're talking about greed, as with any thing that creates karma, anything that might be considered a sin, we're talking about something which is rooted in a natural impulse that human beings have, that is good and fair and reasonable, and that becoming distorted or taken to an extreme. And so when it comes to greed, what we're really talking about is the fact that human beings, we have certain needs. We need to acquire things in order to sustain ourselves physically, in order to survive. You know, an ethical philosopher would talk about the basic needs, food, water, and shelter. You know, we need food to feed ourselves so we can stay alive. We need water to hydrate ourselves. We need a roof over our heads to protect us from the elements. These are just basic needs that people need to just live a comfortable life. And you wouldn't say that it's greedy for a person to want any of these things. It's got nothing to do with doing anything that comes at the expense of another, unless you live in a society of artificial scarcity. And it's just about what you need, and not more than that. But when things get into the territory of wanting more than you really need for some reason, that's when it starts to venture into the territory of greed. And I'm not talking about just having nice things in life. I'm talking about, you know, placing value in material wealth to an extent that is irrational and you know, quite illusory and delusional, and also, you know, starting to want things to such an extent that it's going to come at the expense of other people in one form or another. That's greed. And, you know, in modern society, we're taught that that's natural, that we live in a competitive world where it's the survival of the fittest, and that's just the way of the world. But it's really not. We're a very cooperative species by nature. We want to help each other and support each other, and not be atomized individuals competing against one another. But we've been convinced that that's what human nature is like, because that is the way the economic system wants us to behave. But it's a lie. And, you know, we can miss opportunities to really have more in life and to share that abundance with other people when we learn how to cooperate with each other, versus when we're just out for ourselves, trying to get as much as we can for ourselves. Because if you're part of a community and you're exchanging things with each other, then you're enriching one another with each other's experience. But if you're just out for yourself, then you don't have that. You know, so you could go out and get the newest, flashiest TV that's better than everybody else's TV, or you could go out and steal somebody's TV. Or you could join a community page and you could barter with somebody who has a TV and give them something that you have that maybe they want, and you're both enriched by that experience, and you both get something out of it. And what's more, you're getting more than just the material possession. You're getting a sense of community, which is something you can't put a price tag on. But modern society and the modern economy doesn't want us to think in this way. It just wants us to be materialistic and greedy and competitive. I've talked about how greed really begins when you want more than you really need. And I guess the alternative to that is being happy with relatively little, with a more humble, simple life. Now, I don't want to be misunderstood here, because there are some very evil people in this world who have been telling you, and will tell you again in the future, that to own nothing is good, and you should be happy owning nothing. Those people are trying to establish a global tyranny, and you should not listen to them. And ultimately they're hypocrites, because by everybody else owning nothing, it means that they will own everything. And so they will epitomize the very pinnacle of greed. So this isn't about living in a communist society or a feudal society where you own nothing, but the Lord or the corporation or the corporatist technocratic government owns everything. This is about not being enamored by the material world and not feeling like your sense of self-worth is dependent on how much stuff you own, and being able to be happy and fulfilled without having all of this other stuff. But that's a choice that you make. You choose to live that way. It's not that your property is being forcibly taken from you. And if you do own things, there's still a very important decision to make about if you want to dispose of that property, what is the wisest way of doing it? Who do you really want to give that to? But because we live in a consumerist society, in a very materialistic society, where we're brainwashed into thinking that we won't be happy until we have X, Y, and Z possession. We have to have the biggest Jeep, we have to have the biggest house, we have to have this or that clothing brand because that, represents who we are as a person and it gives us a sense of identity. So we're told we need all of these things, but we really don't. It's materialism and consumerism. It's a hollow dead end in terms of finding satisfaction in life. Think about any time that you've gone shopping and you've really looked forward to getting this thing that you want and buying it, and you think you're going to be happy when you get that. You might feel a bit of elation when you first acquire this new thing, but in time the feeling wears off. But that's false advertising, because you're told that you would be fulfilled if only you have this thing. But if the buzz from getting that thing wears off so quickly, then it's really a false promise, and it can't give you the fulfillment that you need. Finding a sense of well-being and peace and tranquility in spirit is something that won't ever wear off. And of course, if you depend on material things for your happiness, you're putting yourself at the mercy of the external world. You need something before you can be happy that somebody else has to give you, that you have to pay for in order to get. Whereas, you could be happy with simply being, and nobody can take that away from you. It's about being more in control of your own life and being able to find happiness and fulfillment from less. And the idea that if you just have all of this wealth, if you just have all of these material things, that you will somehow be happier in life is a complete lie anyway. Because there was a psychiatrist for the 1%ers who said something in an article a few years ago about their clients, and actually said that the people that are at the very top of the economic pyramid, they're actually miserable a lot of the time because they've got so much wealth. And of course, everybody else in society is greedy as well. It's not just the 1%ers. So you've got all of these people who look at them as a walking money bag and just want to get their money, whether it's by marrying and then divorcing them or suing them or whatever it is. And so they're unable to, or securing a better share of the inheritance or the estate, whatever it is. And so you've got all of these people who you can't form relationships with. You can't form authentic relationships with because you're afraid that they only want to form that relationship with you to get your money. And that takes a real toll. And, so having more means the maintenance and upkeep of having that extra possession. It creates extra stress. If you had a bit of extra disposable income over the last few years and you bought Bitcoin, you know what I mean. When you see that little line turning red and going down, how much stress do you feel as a result of that? How much money are you afraid of losing if it doesn't just go up again if you hodl for long enough? That anxiety and that stress, you wouldn't have that if you didn't have that extra possession. It would simplify life, and it would make life a lot less stressful for you. So is it really worth having that thing if that's the result? And this is the reality of wanting more than we need and holding on to more than we need. And greed deludes us into thinking that it's going to help us in some way. And the other thing that you need to think about as well with wanting more than you actually need is, what is your motivation for that? And that comes to the second part of this phenomenon of greed, I suppose. What do you really want that for? Because, you can want to accumulate things, you can want to build a business, or whatever it is, and your key driver, your key motivation by that, it's not about the money. It's about trying to create something, build something that is going to benefit other people, and is going to, to enrich the human experience in some way. And that is a noble endeavor. Maybe even helping people in some way, improving the world, leaving it better than it was when you came into it. That's all, for a noble cause. And I think if you're trying to accumulate things, if you're trying to build something because of that, then that's different to greed, I think. But, often we'll delude ourselves into thinking that we have a noble cause when in fact it really is just about the money or have the possession of things. So it's important to always scrutinize our motivation for things. And an antidote against that can be understanding that we don't really own anything anyway. We're on this world for a period of time. We amass things around us, which we call our property, and then one day we're gone, and then, that property doesn't go with us into the afterlife. It goes to somebody else. At best we can say that we are loaning everything that we have from the universe. And so the only thing that really matters is not what we own, what we have, but what we do with the resources that are under our control or influence while we're here. But greed convinces us and deceives us into thinking that there is some truth or some merit into just having stuff for its own sake, and just that there's, that we can just have more stuff, and that the more stuff we have, the better it is for us. And, if you dig a bit deeper into the motivations behind that kind of greed, it's always based in something egotistical. We want all of this money so that we can be better than other people, so that we can say that we've got a bigger paycheck than the other person, so that we can get this, this car that's better than other people's car, or this house that's better than other people's house. A status symbol. Ultimately it's motivated by pride. We want to be better than other people. And we feel that, we deserve more than other people because we've worked so hard, as though like everybody else in the world isn't working hard, except for the economic elite. I think that they are just, they're just living off the exploited labour of everybody else on their yacht. But for most people, we all work hard, and we're all, we all get back less than we deserve from the work that we put in, because that's the way the entire economic system is structured. But we convince ourselves that our case is unique, that we're particularly hard done by and particularly victimized, and so the universe needs to compensate us later by giving us more than other people have. And that is the justification for a lot of this greed. But why? Again, why? Why do you need all of that stuff? Is it just because you need to feel like you're above other people? Now, if that's your motivation, then you really need a better set of values to live by. And we can also want more because we want power. We want the power and the control that having more financial resources will grant us. Again, that's based in the ego. That is based in putting yourself over and above other people. It's not a healthy motivation to have. So if you feel like you need more for whatever reason, scrutinize that reason and see if it really is based in virtue. So I've spoken about, some of the deluded ways of thinking that greed can encourage us to have, some of the dead ends that it leads us down in, feeling satisfied in life. But greed is also a negative thing because of the effect that it has on the other people around us. If you allow yourself to feel greed, then it will be very easy for you to find yourself in situations where you find that you're obtaining a benefit in life that other people don't have at the expense of other people. You think about the way that so much labor has been outsourced by these big corporations since, say, the 80s or 90s. They wanted to increase their profit margin. They wanted to make more money for the corporation that they don't have to then spend on wages. And the way they did that was by outsourcing production to a country where they could pay the workers much less for the same labor. And you could say that for the people living in those countries, it was really good for them to have that job. It meant that they could escape from a rural setting where they don't have access to clean drinking water and could send money back to their families. Fine. But that doesn't change the fact that labor has a set value, and the corporation is paying one group of people much less for the same labor. It's ripping them off. And so that wanting more profits by the corporation comes at the expense of people who are working, who imagine how many more members of their family they could have helped who are living in poverty if they were paid what they really deserved for doing that labor. But greed doesn't want us to think about that. Greed wants us to only think about ourselves and our needs, and not the bigger picture. Not, well, if we have more, where does that come from? Is it at the expense of another person that we obtain that benefit? Is it at the expense of the natural environment? If we have such rapid exponential growth that we're encouraging by consuming at a certain level, that it means that we're destroying the world around us, the life support system that we and future generations will rely upon. If we buy that extra investment property or 2 or 3 investment properties, by having that, is that to the detriment of other people? Are we benefiting from tax breaks on those properties that give us more money in our back pocket, but drive the price of properties up so that people that are just entering the housing market can't afford to buy a home and have that security of having a place to live? That's all questions that greed doesn't want us to think about, because we may well find that in our drive to obtain more than we need, we're actually making things harder for other people. Because greed comes with all of its justifications, it means that we don't care. It ultimately leads to us not caring that we are benefiting at the expense of another person. That's just the way the world is, after all, right? It's the way that it's always been. And so people give up their moral responsibility for their actions, and they have no accountability for their personal decisions. And another more subtle way that greed really comes at the detriment of other people is the fact that it sets up a system where you have some people that have more than they could ever need in one lifetime. And at the same time, you have people who are going without, who aren't even meeting their basic needs. And that's the situation that we find ourselves in today. That is this scenario that modern society has created over the past few decades, because this greed has just been allowed to continue unchecked and unfettered. So that those who already have much have been allowed to get richer, and those who have little have got poorer as a result, because there's a transfer of wealth happening there from the poor to the rich, because any wealth that we have has to come from somewhere. And these big CEOs, they like to say it's because they just worked harder than everybody else, but the reality is, no, they took it from other people. One counterpoint you often hear to this is, well, those people at the very top, the executives, the CEOs, the reason why they earn more than the average person at the company is because they work so much harder. That executive functioning, that specialist skill, that's the reasons why they get paid so much more. But, there are corporations where the CEO gets paid like 200 times as much as their workers, or over 200 times more. So are they working 200 times harder than the average worker? I don't think so. I think it's got more to do with control of the resources, of the economic resources, and distributing those resources in a way that is grossly unfair. Because that's how the entire economic system is set up. But if you have this situation where you could help somebody, you could house somebody, or you could feed somebody, or you could clothe somebody, and it wouldn't cause any discomfort to you because of how much you have, how moral is it for you to do nothing? To not feed that person, to not clothe that person, to not give that person a roof over their head? Surely, recognizing that this injustice exists and doing nothing is a sin and is allowing evil to continue. And yet that is exactly the situation that we find ourselves in with so many people in this society. But greed tells us that's ours. We possess that. So it's our right to hold on to that and do whatever we want with it. And we don't have to give it to somebody else because their need is greater. Even if it will create no real detriment to us in terms of affecting our level of comfort. That is obscene. That is just an obscene way of thinking. That having more than you could ever need in one lifetime and holding on to that status and hoarding that wealth for its own sake is more important than a human life. That is greed. That is the distorted view of reality that greed creates. And it is at the root of almost all the problems that we face in the world today. Which is why it's so important that we overcome greed in our own personal lives. That's where the war against greed has to begin. And I hope in this video I've demonstrated, alternatives to greed and ways that you can escape, the ego convincing us that greed is good. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Subscribe to my Odyssey also. Leave any comments that you might have down below. But thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.